All right, we're going to talk about three things that every leader has control over. It's not easy to control them, but they're really honestly the three things that we have control over. And those are the thoughts, your attitudes, and your actions. And thoughts are funny because, they change all the time, but they're really powerful. What you're thinking in your head will honestly dictate what your attitude will be for the day, for the week, and so on. And then they will alter your actions. So really starting with those moment by moment thoughts is really critical. And we have automatic thoughts. There's some people are optimistic, some people are pessimistic overall. Positive thinking versus negative thinking, that kind of thing. And you really have to get control of them because they can really spiral out of control. At my house on Sundays, like the stress of the week to come starts to leach into everybody's mind. And it's amazing. I'll watch one of my daughters start talking about school and start worrying about school, and this train of thinking that it's going to be stressful, it's going to be hard, and they don't like the schedule, and they don't like this change, and they don't like this teacher, and they don't like this kid that sits in their classroom. And then it just spirals out of control, and it's like this giant snowball. It collects more and more snow, more and more anxiety as it rolls down the hill. And this is a great example of negative thinking that can almost lead into negative attitudes about the school experience, and then they can even end up having a bad week. Now, amazingly, what ends up happening is they go to school on Monday, everything's fine, they come home, it really wasn't nearly as bad as they thought it would be. Isn't that true? A lot of times we make things up in our mind, we make them out to be true, and they're not really true. So our thoughts can be really, really powerful. So be careful for them. Be aware of what you're thinking, and try to extinguish or, put out this negative thinking before it starts to explode into something that you really can't control anymore. Here's some examples of thoughts that are automatic and can cause problems because they're not necessarily true. Some people are afraid of making mistakes and they think mistakes are terrible. Mistakes are really an important part of leadership and life and learning. Here's another one I like. My childhood must always control me. Not everybody grew up with the greatest experience as a young person. You do not have to become what your parents were. You don't have to allow coming from a terrible background to continue to make you have a terrible background. Thinking you're inferior, that you're not smart. Man, I can identify with that one. I was convinced I wasn't as smart as anybody else or a lot of people, and it was really more about my effort. It wasn't about my intelligence at all. Even just thinking that you should be happy all the time. You're not going to be happy all the time. That's almost like a worthless endeavor. It's too unrealistic of an expectation. You should be happy sometimes. If you're never happy, then that's definitely a problem too. You deserve to be happy. Just don't expect it all the time. And then this last one here I like. It says, I can't help what happens to me. I think we have a lot of control over what happens to us. Not always, but I would say we should control what we can control, and that's our thoughts, our attitudes, and our actions. I can't control somebody else's attitude. If they have a bad attitude and I'm near them, I can control mine. I'm not going to let their bad attitude get me down. Okay, so think about some automatic thoughts that cause you some trouble. Mine was I wasn't thinking I was smart. I was always trying to prove people wrong. I still do that. And I don't think that's necessarily a healthy thing. It does work, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's good for me. All right, so let's move on to the next page. Thoughts really can limit us. Here's some limiting thoughts here at the bottom of the page. I can't do fill in the blank. That's one that I think a lot of us say a lot. I can't do it. And that's a limiting thought. You can really do anything. You might not be able to do it right now, but eventually you can do it. I can't do it today, but I'm going to work on some skills and tools so I can do it eventually. Saying we can't do it or this problem is unsolvable, that's a negative attitude. And there are people who are like that. We call them ducks. Because all ducks like to do, what do they like to do? They like to quack. And they are dependent upon criticism and killing success. That stands for ducks. And they like to look at a problem and just say it's unsolvable. And they like to pick it apart And they like to sit and whine and complain rather than actually try to sit, be creative, think of a problem, work, with other people, roll up their sleeves, as they say, and get to work on a problem. They'd rather just say they can't do it. It's easier to do that, right? It's easier to complain. It's easier to say that this is stupid. No one has done this before. Well, that doesn't mean somebody can't do it now. I mean, think about how many pioneers have established culture. All of the pioneers that sailed seas in boats 600 years ago and found new lands, and, people who traveled west in the United States and established the whole West Coast and got sick and risked their lives and had families and that kind of thing while they were on the road. Why can't I make this work? That's an okay question as long as you're trying to come up with an answer to that. And what's wrong with me? That's a very limiting thought. There's nothing wrong with you. You've been born perfectly. And you have to understand that about yourself. That you've been put here for a reason. You've been born perfectly with all the skills and tools. Yeah, you got to practice. You're going to have to improve. You're going to have to learn new things. But you've been given physical and mental gifts. And you should always remember that about yourself. Well, let's talk about attitude for a minute. Okay, your attitudes are basically feelings caused by your thoughts. And you have to remember that it's not just about your IQ, it's your EQ, your emotional quotient, how you treat people. And, if you're going to be a leader, you have to be doing the WIT, which is whatever it takes. And you also have to remember the difference between good and great is 5% extra effort. So if you're having a hard time with your thoughts and you're a negative thinker, putting the 5% extra effort into that is replacing those thoughts with positive thoughts or putting a stop to them. Doing whatever it takes means improving your attitude. If you're always down, you're always negative, you're always making fun of people, you're always complaining about your schoolwork and school and your parents and this and that, it's hard to be around you. I want you to realize that. Think about it. You all know people who are negative. Are you somebody who people are happy to see walk in the door? Or are you somebody that people are happy to see walk out the door? Or are you somebody that people never noticed that you walked in or out of the door? That's another thing. Some people you're not alive enough. You're not even getting involved. Just kind of sit in the corner and do nothing. And never share your thinking, never share your thoughts, never share your attitudes. Nobody can ever read your hand because you're unplugged. And maybe it's because you're shy or you just don't feel like you're included in the group. I'm not sure what it is, but you got to pull something out of yourself and get involved. But I would also hope that you don't want to be one of those people that people are happy to see walk out the door. It's almost like a relief. They don't have to deal with your burden, with your attitude and your negative thinking. And I get it. You might be hurting and you don't know how to fix it. If you're hurting and you don't know how to fix it, then it's time to go talk to somebody and get help. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what a leader would do. All right, so this thing about your thoughts is really powerful because they start to bleed into your attitudes, and your attitudes become who you are and what you do. And if who you are and what you do becomes negative and becomes, counterproductive and destructive, not only for yourself but for other people, then that needs fixing. And you deserve better. And the people in your life, especially if you're a leader, they deserve better too.